Hello, today I'm going to show you how to make a photograph lamp, or what is usually called a lithophane, and we'll do this using Blender. If you've never seen a lithophane before, it is basically a thin, plane, sphere, box, or anything really, with a photo or image set into it in such a way that when you shine a light on the back, the photo shows through rather pleasingly. Now, lithophanes are usually done using specialized websites, which do a great job. But in Blender, they are really easy to make, and they have the advantage of allowing you to do them on any shape you like. So here we are at the default Blender start screen, and the first thing we need to do is to delete this cube. So select the cube, press X, and delete. Now you can start with anything flat at all, but I'm going to start with a grid. So add mesh grid. Now, if we look in the N panel, which you get to by pressing N, and go to the Item tab, we can see in the dimensions how big this is, and we can see it's sort of 2 millimeters square, which is pretty small, to be honest, unless you have a really, really small printer. So I'm going to scale this up. By making sure it's selected, I'll press S and drag. And I'll look in the dimensions to see when it gets to 200. Alternatively, I can just change these to 200. Now, in order to put a photograph on here, we're going to need quite a bit of geometry. And if I go into edit mode, with tab, you can see that there actually isn't that much geometry. So we'll need to add some more. And the way I'm going to do that is to go into the modifiers tab over here, add a modifier, generate, and subdivision surface, and increase the resolution by increasing this levels viewport button here up to, say, 6. Now you can see that it's curved at the corners, and you might want that, in which case just keep it, but I don't. So I'm going to change to simple in the subdivision surface modifier over here. That adds the same amount of geometry, but it doesn't do any of the smoothing normally associated with the subdivision surface modifier. Okay, so now we have this, we now want to add the photograph to our grid, and we do that with a displace modifier. So let's add a displace modifier, add modifier, deform, displace. So now we want to add a photograph to our displace modifier, and we do that by pressing the button marked new here. And then once we've done that, this funny little icon over on the right here. And this takes us to the texture section of our displacement. And this is the preview of our texture, which is nothing at the moment. So we're now going to open a new texture, and that's going to be an image here. So we click on open, and then we navigate to where our pictures are. Now your picture should be high contrast if possible, and not cluttered. If it's really cluttered, it's going to be difficult to see. You want something clean and as simple as you can. And for that, I'm going to use my cat. Click on open image, and here's my cat over here. By default, I have the source as UDIM tiles, and this isn't a UDIM tile. So I'm going to change this to a single image. And now you can see what's happened to the model. It looks quite nasty, really. But we need to go back to our displacement modifier, and we need to change the coordinates to UV. So let's look at our model. It looks a little bit like that cat, to be honest, but only a little bit like it. Now the reason it looks like this is because the strength is too much. So we can adjust the strength over here in our displace modifier and the strength slider. If I move that, you can see it changes the amount of placement. If you hold the shift key down, you can get more precise control. Now for a lithophane, what you need is for the white parts of your photograph to be inset into the model and the dark parts to be sticking out. And if I zoom in on this foot, which I know is white, I can see it sticking out quite a lot. So I'm going to change the strength until it is, until it is inset into the model, and not too much, otherwise we will end up with overhangs and when we 3D print it, there'll be supports all over the place and you don't want that. So this looks about okay. Should get away with that. Now, as you can see, cat is a little bit squashed on the x-axis, and that's because the aspect ratio of the photograph doesn't match the aspect ratio of the square grid that we made. So there are two ways of fixing this. Three ways if we include just scaling the model, and that might work. Let's try it. S, X. That would work fine if you were happy with just scaling the grid or plane or whatever it is you're using. But I'm not. Let's assume we need this square. There are two ways to adjust the photograph and stretch the photograph we have here. I will show you the basically simple way after the best way. And the best way is to use UV editing. It's not difficult. It's quite easy. So you don't need to be frightened of it. What we will do is we will go into UV editing mode. You will either have a UV editing option up here, or it may be an option under here. But for me, we're going to UV editing mode here. And our model, our grid in edit mode, is over here on the right hand side. And this section over here represents the texture that we are using. Now our texture in this case is a photograph. Just pop into edit mode over here with tab. You can see that the image is there, but you can't see anything on the left hand pane here because you can only really adjust the texture or photograph whilst in edit mode. So what do we want to do with this? We really just want to stretch this on the X. So if I go back into edit mode and then move my mouse over to the left pane and press A, I have selected all the points that represent parts of the texture or photograph in this case. And this area here can be rotated, moved, scaled, just like anything in Blender. So I'm actually going to scale this along the x-axis and hopefully it will stretch our texture. So let's do that. S, X, I'll scale it. Whoop, wrong way. There you go. Now let's have a look back on the right hand side here. Go into object mode. That's odd. It's made it smaller. Now, I don't know why this is. I haven't really worked it out and I don't really care. But the operations you do, scaling and rotating on this left-hand pane, are kind of in opposite of what you want to do. So, for example, if I want to scale this on the X and make it bigger, scale X, I have to actually make this smaller, like that. And then we go to the right-hand pane, go to edit mode. Yeah. But there is a problem here now. Cat's tail is missing. So really we want to scale the whole image down. Go back to edit mode, go over here, scale with S, and to make it smaller, we actually have to make this bigger. Go back into the right hand pane, go into object mode, and there you go. Now this is nearly okay, but we want to move the cat a little bit to the left. Edit mode, grab with G, and move it a little bit to the right. Go back in here, press tab. There you go. Cat to the right. Now we have some stuff on the top and the bottom. If you're interested in why we have some of the image up here, that can be explained by going into our displacement modifier, clicking on here, and you'll see under mapping, we have extension, so it's repeating this image. If I change that to clip, it's only one image, and we get bars at the top and the bottom. Now this is basically okay. You could print it like this, but what I'm going to do is go into edit mode with tab, select these vertices, and select these vertices. Just delete them with X, vertices, tab. There we go. This is pretty much making the cat look quite nice and normal now. So I'm going to go back into my normal layout mode, and we're back here again. I did promise I'd show you another way of doing this. And we had a little clue just now. If we go click this little funny icon in our displace modifier again and go down to mapping, select mapping, and then under crop, we have these maximum XY and minimum XY sliders here. Now you can use this with the shift key held down to get some precision to stretch and move the image in here too. Now, I don't think this is as precise, but you can do it this way. I should just reset this. Obviously, in order to print this, we're going to have to give it some thickness. Now for me, the simple way to do this is to go into edit mode and extrude. E. Now it is already constrained to the Z, as you can see by this blue line, but if it isn't, press Z and put it down. We don't have to go down very far. Let's go. Now as you can see, mine is red now, and that's because I have face orientation set to on over here, and this just means that my model is inside out. So I'm going to select everything with A, go mesh, normals, flip, or you could do all N and flip if you wanted to. Now this is all the right way around, and we have some thickness. If we go into object mode, then we have our model, but whoa, it's all a bit funny around here and over here. We can fix that. Go into the modifiers tab, in displacement, change the direction to Z. Magic. Now you'd think we were almost there, and we are, but there seems to be a cat underneath this as well as on top of it. We don't really want that. So what we're going to do is we're going to make the displacement modifier only apply to the top of this model rather than underneath it. And the way to do that is to use vertex groups. So let's do that. It's not complicated. We go into edit mode. We want to select the vertices that should have the displacement on them, and that's the top ones. So I'm going to do that by pressing the X-ray button and selecting the top ones. Hope that worked. Looks like it. Turn X-ray back off, and then go over to this little triangle thingy over here, and in the vertex groups box, press plus, and we have a new group. Now you can rename this if you want to, but I can't be bothered. So what we're going to do is just assign the selected vertices to this group called group. And that's pretty much all we need to do. If we go back to our displacement now, and down here you'll see there's a vertex group box in there. It shows us all the groups it knows about, and that's one of them called group. If I select that and now go into object mode, it's only put the displacement on the top. Now we're nearly done really, except it's still too thick. If we look over here, it's 11.5 millimeters thick. If you shone a light underneath there, none of the light is going to get through. Now I'm recommending it should be about 4 millimeters thick for it to work. You might get away with 5 or even 6, but I'm going to go for 4 on this model. It's 11.5 millimeters now, let's just say 11, and we want 4 millimeters. So we need to take off 7 millimeters. So how are we going to do that? Well, if you press tab and go into edit mode and select all the bottom faces, and the easiest way to do that, considering I already have the top faces selected, is to press Ctrl I, which inverts the selection, and then we grab along the Z axis by pressing G and Z. And if you look at the top right hand corner, it shows how many millimeters we've moved. And we want 7. That'll do. It's close enough. And now let's go into object mode. It's very thin, maybe a little bit too thin. It's beginning to come through. So I'm going to drop that down just a little bit more. Edit mode, grab Z. Let's go 0.5 millimeter or so. Whoop, 1.5. I'll do. That's better. Now there's one more thing we should probably do with this. If we zoom in, you can see we have quite sharp points here, and your printer nozzle isn't going to be able to print those. So it's not absolutely necessary, but I would recommend adding another subdivision surface modifier right at the end. This might take a little while, but when it's done, it should smooth all these out. And there you go. now that's a little bit more smooth and probably will print better. Or definitely, but probably. So there you have it. We have our lithophane. You can print that. And if you want to just print this, then you can skip forward to the section on the video on how to print this. Otherwise, we'll sit here and we'll make a funny shape out of this. Now, because we have quite a lot of subdivision surface going on here, any operations we do are going to be really slow. So while we do this, I suggest turning off the subdivision surface modifiers. Let's add a curve, a circle. There you go. There's a circle in there. Honest, if I turn the grid off, there's a very small circle in there. And then select the grid again, and we add a new modifier under form called curve. There it is there. Whoops, there it is there. And then if we select this pipette thing over here and select the circle that we created, it'd be easier to do it up here than in the viewport because you can't even see it. Now it has made a bit of a mess of everything. But if we select the circle, scale it, eventually, after a bit of a psychedelic display, we'll get something slightly less mad. What we have now is we do have our grid, which is here, and it is following the circle, just following it on the wrong axis. And if we go back to our curve modifier, select the grid, go to the curve modifier, and change the deform axis to Y. There you go, it's lifted it up, and it's following the circle around. We can scale the circle again if we want to. Scale to make it more bendy, maybe even a full cylinder. But I'll leave it like this for now. And now let's select the grid. If we turn our subdivisions on again, well, there we go. We have our cat on a curve. Now, if you look closely, you'll see that it's not very smooth. There's ridge lines in there. And that's because the circle doesn't have enough geometry. So I'm just going to add a little bit of geometry to the circle. We'll select it, go into edit mode, right click, subdivide, and then in this little box down here, change this up to 10. And we have lots of geometry now. And now those ridges have gone and it all looks nice and smooth. You can, if you want to, rotate this model along the remarkably z-axis. And you can do it this way if you want instead. So that's it. We have a lithophane following a curve in this case, which we can now print. So let's get on to printing this. First thing we need to do, of course, is to export this thing. So select the model, File, Export, STL, find a place you want to save it. Can't remember where I save it. And we'll call it lithophane. Now remember, the selection only box must be ticked. Let's export STL. It'll take a moment to do it. And we're done. So let's look at the printing process. I'm going to use Prusa Slicer for this, but you can use Cura or any other slicer that you want. The technique will still be the same. The first thing we're going to do is import our model. Now it's got quite a lot of triangles, but there it is. It's already orientated in such a way that there are no overhangs and that would print quite easily. But do note, it is a tall model and would very easily fall over. So if you have a printer bed that moves backwards and forwards, like this one does, it's best to rotate the model so that the bed movement will be as small as possible. Otherwise, it could quite easily knock it over. I'm going to rotate this so that most of the movement will be done by the print head moving on the x-axis. I think that should do it. Okay, that's fine. Now, we don't want any infill. Can't have infill on a print like this. So I will turn that off. Now what we need to do instead of infill is increase the number of perimeters. In print settings, I will set the perimeters. This is 4mm. I'm guessing 5 perimeters should do it, but we can check afterwards. And they were almost done, but there's still a good chance that this would fall over. So I would recommend a brim. And I'm going to do a 4mm brim here. So let's slice this and see what we get. And this should be okay. Now, there is a little bit of a gap here. But as long as it hasn't got infill in it, it'll probably be okay. Although, if I'm honest, I would be happier changing the number of perimeters here. So let's just do that. Print setting, layers and perimeters, change that to 6, and reslice. That looks better. We don't have any infill, and we have no gaps. There you go. That should print okay. Now, if you'd like to see any videos on something that YouTube thinks is interesting, then please click on one of the videos that appears on the top right, and I might put something down the bottom left, which is exciting too. Please feel free to comment if you wish. I do read all of them, and I answer all of them too. So if you have any questions, please put them in the comment section below, and I'll get back to you. Thank you for watching. I hope this was useful, and thank you.